was sworn to secrecy. I'd been bribed not to write it. I'd been threatened when I tried to write it earlier. And I'd postponed it. I'd put off.
But how are we supposed to protect ourselves, another woman asks. We don't even have soap. As the international response ramps up, the New York Times reports the Trump administration plans to send Americans exposed to Ebola to Kenya rather than bringing them back.
Machine interface that can give you cybernetic superpowers, I think, is probably good. It could, help people that have brain or spine injuries.
You are a war criminal, and you will be tried. You should be disgusted with yourself. You have nothing to show for yourself but war and disgust.
Welcome to the sacrificed.
Accountability mechanism cannot just be with teenagers, right? I know where my son was at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Mayor Johnson is calling on parents to be more responsible after 5 police officers are injured in a teen takeover. WGN's Andrea Medina has our top story.
Neighbors say they were completely blindsided by what unfolded overnight, calling it a relentless, unpredictable scene that left many feeling uneasy and unable to get any sleep. A massive crowd of teens took over the streets near 13th and Troop in the Little Italy neighborhood Saturday night into Sunday morning, filling sidewalks, intersections, and blocks.
When I say that it looked like millions of kids out here. Kids were all on top of their cars. They were stopping in the middle of the street, twerking, and it was ridiculous.
Neighbors, some just returning from late night shifts, others already settling in for the evening, described the scene became increasingly chaotic between Troop and Loomis Streets along Roosevelt Road, eventually shutting down the area.
2 teenagers shot just about a week apart during these mass gatherings in Detroit, and the most recent just last night on the west side. Last week, we spoke with 14-year-old Tavon Clark, who was shot in the chest after a fight broke out during a teen takeover downtown. On Saturday, the 17-year-old accused of pulling the trigger was charged as an adult.
The teen takeovers have been causing problems for weeks. Last month, Detroit Mayor Mary Sheffield announced a 6-point plan to address summer violence, focusing on gun safety, curfew compliance, and youth engagement. Well, Randy Wimbley is your Detroit reporter, and he was there for that announcement last month. Tonight, he's raising the voices of concerned neighbors and community leaders, asking, what is the solution?
Massive crowds flooded Peterson Park on Detroit's west side on Memorial Day for another so-called teen takeover.
Oh my God, this is horrible.
Neighbors tell me it started out peaceful, but things took a turn as fights broke out and police moved in to disperse the crowds. All of it leaving neighbors like this man who did not want to be identified on edge.
Me and the neighbors, we talked about it today, and it was just like, I don't know. I don't know, or, what's causing this. And this is spreading, how serious it's going to get. Yeah. And the summer just began. Where's the next one going to be? Because I started thinking about my property.
Russia hit Kyiv with hundreds of drones and missiles on Sunday, one of the heaviest bombardments of the city since the start of the 4-year war. It also fired an Oreshnik hypersonic missile near the capital. It's only the 3rd time that the intermediate-range missile, which is capable of carrying a nuclear warhead, has been used in the conflict. Officials say Sunday's hours-long barrage killed several people and wounded more than 80. This 20-year-old, already displaced from Russian-occupied territory, told Reuters he thought he was going to die. Touring the damage, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky had this to say.
Museums, schools, just apartments. The Museum of Chernobyl, which was built, by the way, for the anniversary, it was built just 1 month ago. So they saw this museum, they attacked us exactly to the museum. Just crazy assholes. Thank you.
Zelensky condemned the attack, saying there must be consequences for Russia. On the Telegram messaging app, he wrote that decisions from the United States, Europe and others were needed. Ukraine's air force said that Russia launched 90 missiles and 600 drones. Russia said the attack was in retaliation to Kyiv's strikes on civilian targets in Russia. Ukraine says it does not target civilians. Moscow also denies targeting civilians, although thousands have been killed by its bombardments of Ukrainian cities during the war.
Breaking news for you. Renewed call for help from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who sent a letter to President Trump over the Memorial Day weekend asking for more weapons from the United States. Live at CBS News, Katrina Kaufman. Katrina, what do we know about this outreach?
Reed, this letter is all about Ukraine's need for more Patriot missiles from the United States for defense against Russia. President Zelensky wrote this letter to President Trump on Memorial Day, and he implored him to send more of these Patriot missiles. He also said that the current way that they're getting to Ukraine, it's just too slow. They're not getting them fast enough. And just for a little context, these are anti-ballistic missiles, so they're protective. They intercept missiles that are coming in from Russia. And in the letter, Zelensky talks about this attack from Russia on the eve of Memorial Day. And Reed, he called it an especially cruel, massive attack against Ukraine. It killed nearly 100, or it injured nearly 100 people. Some people were also killed.
Tell us, how is it that you got brought into the profession that you held?
Well, while I was still in business school in 1968, the National Security Agency recruited me. And the way that happened was that I was married to a woman whose father was very high up in the Department of the Navy, and one of his best friends was very high up in the National Security Agency. So they offered to interview me for a job, and I went in and I spent a couple of days there, especially one very intensive period when I was under lie detector interviews. And during that period of time, they discovered many weaknesses in me. I have a lot of weaknesses. And they identified me as a good candidate for an economic hitman. And then I was sent into the Amazon rainforest by the Peace Corps. I went in the Peace Corps for a short period of time, 3 years actually, and went into the Amazon and worked with people who were very strongly opposed to what the oil companies are doing to the Amazon, indigenous people there in the Amazon. It was really part of my training. While I was still there, a vice president from a major international consulting firm came down, and who was also had connections with the National Security Agency, and knew that they had identified me and recruited me for this job, because economic hitmen work through private corporations, not directly for the government. That keeps everything much more secret, and it leaves the government out. The government cannot be implicated as long as this is being done through private consultants. The consulting firms, of course, are paid by the U.S. government as consulting firms, and people like me, then my salary was paid by this consulting firm. But it was very clear, it was very obvious to me what I was supposed to do, and after I agreed to join this effort, I was then trained by an amazing woman who's described in detail in Confessions of an Economic Hitman. Her name is Claudine, and she was very beautiful, very seductive, extremely talented, knew exactly what to do, knew all the hooks, knew all my weaknesses, and brought me in.
You know, I think some kind of brain-machine interface that can give you cybernetic superpowers, I think, is probably good. It could, help people that have brain or spine injuries, enable people who've never spoken for years to speak again, which we've done. Give people eyesight who have lost both eyes or the optic nerve, or maybe have never even seen at all, blind from birth, by direct interface to the optical centers in the brain. You can actually restore eyesight, or give people eyesight that they've never had before. And you can enable people to walk again, which I think is profound. I mean, these are kind of Jesus-level things, like, let's say, like, when technologies are hitting, like, Jesus-level miracles, that's pretty good.
Elon Musk has claimed that Neuralink's brain-computer interface could one day be used to restore impaired vision and hearing. In a post on X, Musk said the company is working on devices that can directly stimulate the brain by sending signals to areas responsible for sight and sound. Neuralink's experimental blind sight system targets the visual cortex, allowing people with vision loss to see again, starting with basic low-resolution images. Neuralink is also exploring the use of the auditory cortex to enable hearing restoration through direct brain signals.
The company's controversial founder promises even more.
As we advance the Neuralink devices, you should be able to actually have full body control and sensors from an Optimus robot. So you could basically inhabit an Optimus robot. The future is going to be weird, but pretty cool.
Weird, and with it, serious questions about future users' safety and privacy, but a way off. Neuralink still needs to do larger trials and share its data with the public to prove these devices are safe and effective long term. Elon Musk, whatever you think of him, does have a record of success, but in this endeavour, he depends on brave, determined volunteers like Seb to deliver it.
And in some cases, users could even be giving their data away without even realizing it in the terms and conditions that they sign on their smartphones. But with the way technology is headed, we could see a future where microchip implanting becomes the norm.
I believe that I'm going to be able to use my microchips to do payments in the future, identification, tickets.
In Sweden, every shop, in every kiosk, in public transport, there are always these touch terminals where people either touch their phone or their wallet with a credit card inside.
Kiosk, in public transport, there are always these touch terminals where people either touch their phone or their wallet with a credit card inside.
Detailed in Confessions of an Economic Hitman. Her name is Claudine, and she was very beautiful, very seductive, extremely talented, knew exactly what to do, knew all the hooks, knew all my weaknesses, and brought me in. You know, I like to think of myself as a good person at heart, and I grew up in a family in New Hampshire that came from over 300 years of Yankee Calvinists. We have very strong moral values, very principled, and I think I'm a really good case in point of how the system can seduce you, how there's three very powerful drugs in our lives these days: sex, money, and power. And I was seduced by all three of those.
So when you went into the Peace Corps, was that your own idea, or were you nudged in that direction?
Well, I'd been recruited by the National Security Agency, and while I was still in business school, I happened to go to a Peace Corps recruiting speech, and was quite taken by the recruiter. And I, as I mentioned, grew up in rural New Hampshire. I come from a long line of Yankees who Indians and made love with Indians and created children with them. And I'd always been fascinated by the Abnaki tribe, which I have a little bit of blood from, and always fascinated by Indian lore. And so as I heard this Peace Corps recruiter speak afterwards, I went up to him and I said, is there any possibility if I joined the Peace Corps of going to a place like the Amazon and living with people who live as our indigenous people did here 200-300 years ago? And he said, absolutely. Nobody wants to go to the Amazon. If you volunteer for that, I think you'll be sent there. And then I called this man who had recruited me at the National Security Agency, and I told him about this and told him I was torn because I wanted to go to the NSA, but I also was intrigued by this. He said, go. We'll make sure that you get into the Amazon. He said, that's where all the action is. These are the people who are opposing our oil companies. We need the Amazon for oil. This will be a great experience for you. When you come out, you can work for us.
And it was while you were down there that one of the representatives from the company that you would be working at showed up?
Right. I'd been there about 2 years. I was. It's a 2-year assignment in the Peace Corps, but I'd extended for a third year because I really enjoyed it. And I was also not interested in going to Vietnam, and I had another year before I turned 26 and was no longer draftable. And after the second year, this gentleman showed up. He's talked about extensively in the book and named in the book, and told me he'd be interested in hiring me. And for a year after that, we corresponded. I wrote a lot of letters to him. He asked me a lot of questions about the economy of Ecuador. He was really testing me. He was checking me out. He was seeing where my loyalties were and whether I was able to write books on, reports on the economy of people and really check out the people. So I did that. I passed that test, and a year later he brought me up to Boston, where the headquarters of this company were, and recruited me.
But you had no sense of that at the time, that he was feeling you out for a potential job, or?
Oh yes, I certainly had an inkling of that. Yeah, it was very exciting to me to think that this was going on, because after all, when I talked to the man from the National Security Agency who originally arranged for my interviews and told him of my desire to go in the Peace Corps, he encouraged me. He was the one who said, you know, you can always come to work for us afterwards. So I had a real strong sense that that's what was going on.
Okay, so you then came back and you joined this company, Chas T. Main?
Correct. And we called it Charles. It was spelled C-H-A-S, but Chas T. Main, we usually called it Main just for short. Right. Big. We had about 2,000 employees in Boston. It was what's called a closely held corporation, which means basically a partnership. About 5% of these 2,000 employees owned the company. They were what we call partners, and I became one of those eventually. I became chief economist of that firm, and I ended up having roughly 50 people working for me over time.
And what type of work does that company do?
Well, interesting. The company called itself an engineering construction firm, and we never did any real construction. We never owned any equipment, and in fact we prided ourselves on saying we're objective. We don't need to go into countries and tell them to build big systems, because we don't gain anything from it. We're not like Bechtel or Halliburton, Stone & Webster, any of the big construction companies. We don't do that. But the fact of the matter is, our job was to convince other countries to take very large loans, and then to convince the World Bank and other such organizations to give these countries huge loans, let's say $1 billion, to Ecuador, to build big infrastructure projects, power plants and transmission lines and distribution systems, ports, highways, industrial parks, things that didn't benefit anybody except the very wealthy people in those countries, who were quite corrupt, and we corrupted them. So our job was to convince, let's say, Ecuador to accept $1 billion loan, convince the World Bank to give Ecuador $1 billion loan. 90% of that $1 billion would come back to the United States to pay for Halliburton, Bechtel, these kinds of, or these types of companies, to build the infrastructure, and then, which would only serve the wealthiest people in those countries.
Which would only serve the wealthiest people in those countries.
Well, you just hate billionaires because you're jealous. Nope, not even fucking close. Let me explain something to you, Cletus, that you probably don't know because you don't know how to do math that's not spelled with a fucking E. Elon Musk's net worth has increased by about $500 billion since the day Trump took office. If you do the math, that shakes out to about $10,000 a fucking second, which means that in 90 seconds, he earns more than most Americans do in a fucking decade. And before you get all high and mighty to tell me about how it's all cash, I'm gonna tell you that it doesn't fucking matter. You know why Jeff Bezos caps his salary at $82,000 a year? Because rich, greedy pricks like him don't need a fucking salary. If they want to buy a $200 million yacht, they just take a loan out using their stock as collateral, and when that loan comes due, they take a new loan out that's worth more because the stock is worth more, and they pay it off. And as long as they keep a nice fucking Cheeto ring around their lips from blowing Donald Trump, that cycle will always repeat because he will always feed them more government contracts. And they will pay zero taxes on any of it. In the immortal words of George Carlin, it's a big club and you ain't in it. So you telling me that I'm a radical left lunatic for saying they shouldn't be allowed to do this to us is about like getting fucked from behind, looking over your shoulder to make eye contact with the dude who's doing it, and you point at me and call me a crazy person because I'm telling you that trans people aren't the fucking problem. But if that's your game, by all means, enjoy getting fucked.
A suspected shooter is dead after opening fire near a White House checkpoint yesterday afternoon. Fox 13's Frankie Thompson has more on this story for us.
Inside. Okay, sir, we are journalists. I'm so sorry.
Journalists sent running for cover after shots rang out near the White House. 1400 Pennsylvania Avenue then put on lockdown. The response was swift, with D.C. police responding, taping off entire city blocks near the executive mansion. This video, taken just moments after the shots rang out, is from 18th Street Northwest and Pennsylvania Avenue, 2 blocks from the Oval Office. The FBI says it started when a gunman approached a White House security checkpoint armed with a gun and firing 3 shots. Agents with the U.S. Secret Service fired back, hitting the suspect. That person was taken to the hospital but did not survive.
A person familiar with the investigation tells CBS News the suspected shooter was identified as 21-year-old Nazir Best, and that last July he tried to gain entry into the White House and was arrested, then sent to a psychiatric hospital for mental health issues. Court records show he told Secret Service officers he was Jesus Christ and wanted to be arrested. In this incident, a Secret Service spokesman says the gunman approached a checkpoint around 6 p.m. Saturday, pulled a weapon from his bag and started shooting. The officers returned fire, striking the suspect who died at a nearby hospital. A bystander was also hit by gunfire. The Secret Service says none of its officers were injured. President Trump was inside the White House during the shooting. On social media, he thanked the Secret Service and police.
In fact, the president continued working throughout the evening as he tries to secure a deal with Iran. The president saying onto social, "Thank you to our great Secret Service and law enforcement for the swift and professional action taken this evening against a gunman near the White House who had a violent history and possible obsession with our country's most cherished structure." Several sources tell Fox News Digital the suspect was identified as 21-year-old Nazir Best from Maryland.
But given the fact that this happened only a month after the attempted assassination of Trump at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, in which once again we saw members of the American press corps having to shelter in place and duck for cover, it's another reminder of the elevated threat that seems to exist in America and this rising political violence, even if in this particular case it seems that it might be an individual who was more deranged than politicized, but we will wait to find out more of the details, I suppose.
Arrest records are filling in what happened before shooting an hours-long standoff downtown last week. The report says neighbors called 911 after George Barrios allegedly spent days acting erratically near 11th and Ogden. He claimed to be Jesus, grabbing at a neighbor's bag, banging on doors, and smashing property. One neighbor told police that over the past 30 days, Barrios had been acting odd and making other bizarre claims. The officer who shot at him is on leave as the investigation continues. Records show Barrios remains in custody.
They going to get a bottle, and then they come back. She said we better be ready when they get there. What is that? Because we want to get pissy drunk. Say y'all want to get pissy drunk. What is happening? Fireworks, girl. That is not fireworks. It's not fireworks. It's not fireworks. For sure not fireworks. Now it's fireworks? Now it's fireworks. See how it started? Yeah. The red lights. That was not drones? Like, come on.
This morning, fears about the Ebola outbreak are growing as cases in the Democratic Republic of Congo are surging, surpassing 1,000.
Communities are afraid. People are dying. They are looking for support. There are a lot of rumors that are circulating, infodemic everywhere.
The WHO is expanding its outreach, sharing information about how the virus is spread. We're raising awareness to prevent the worst, this woman says, carrying a megaphone through this refugee camp. But how are we supposed to protect ourselves, another woman asks. We don't even have soap. As the international response ramps up, the New York Times reports the Trump administration plans to send Americans exposed to Ebola to Kenya.
The Trump administration plans to send Americans exposed to Ebola to Kenya. Send Americans exposed to Ebola to Kenya.
Bringing them back to the U.S., citing 3 people with knowledge of the plans. The Times reporting that public health service officers are now being trained to deploy to Kenya. In past Ebola outbreaks, like back in 2014, infected Americans were flown home for treatment in specialized medical units. During that outbreak, some patients were treated at the same Nebraska facility, now monitoring Americans exposed to hantavirus on a cruise ship earlier this month. The U.S. has already evacuated 2 American doctors from the DRC to Europe. Dr. Patrick LaRochelle, who was flown to Prague, told The Washington Post he speaks with his colleague Dr. Peter Stafford regularly, who's receiving treatment in Berlin, and adds he's doing, quote, a lot better. Dr. LaRochelle, who's still asymptomatic, also said he felt proud to be an American when he was safely evacuated, adding what hurts is knowing that is not available to the vast majority of people, and certainly not to my friends in Congo.
And starting this morning back in North America, Canada has imposed a travel ban on residents from the DRC, Uganda, and South Sudan for the next 90 days. It's a temporary measure, according to the government, and Canadian citizens who have been in the region will now have to quarantine for 21 days starting this week.
And aid groups are warning the Ebola outbreak in Central Africa could become the deadliest on record. The International Rescue Committee says 3 key warning sirens are flashing red. The outbreak is spreading faster than the response. Conflict and displacement are accelerating the risk. And global aid cuts have weakened health systems on the front lines. The World Health Organization says the number of suspected cases in eastern Congo is near 1,000, with at least 220 suspected deaths. Now Uganda is closing its border with the Democratic Republic of Congo, trying to slow the spread. IRC Senior Vice President for International Programs, Kieran Donnelly, is here for more. Kieran, thanks for coming on. So what are you hearing from your teams in Africa about how dire this is?
As you said, we are very, very alarmed at the situation on the ground in eastern Congo and indeed in the wider region. The numbers that we're seeing reported of over 220 suspected deaths, almost 1,000 suspected cases, those are almost certainly a significant underestimate of the extent of this outbreak. Reports that it has been circulating for potentially up to 4 months around communities in eastern Congo have us worried that there is a much more widespread set of infections out there in communities that hasn't been undetected. Now, that coupled with the situation in eastern Congo, high levels of conflict, multiple different armed groups controlling territory, porous borders, means that the disease has already spread to Uganda, possibly to other countries, and is set to continue spreading. And the weakened state of the Congolese health system and the humanitarian capacity on the ground, in part because of global funding cuts over the past year, means that the response is not where it needs to be. We and others are scaling up as fast as we can, but we're facing an uphill battle.
You say conflict in the region is fueling this crisis. How?
So in eastern Congo, territory is controlled by multiple different armed groups in opposition to the government, often in opposition to each other. The government of DRC obviously controls quite a significant part of the territory, including Bunia, the capital of Ituri province, which is the epicenter of this outbreak.
And which would only serve the wealthiest people in those countries. And then the country would be stuck with this huge debt, which over time would continue to be refinanced and get larger and larger and larger, so that in fact today Ecuador owes more than 50% of its national budget just to pay down its debt service, which means there's very little money left to go to pay for the education or health services for the poor people, who are the ones who suffered from these projects. It was their rivers that were destroyed as we built hydroelectric plants. It was their land that was destroyed, and while a few of their people got wealthy, as a few of ours did. So now they're saddled with this incredible debt that they can't possibly pay. And so we go in and demand our pound of flesh, very much like the mafia. That's why we called ourselves hitmen. So today, for example, this is actually what's happened in Ecuador. And today, we need Ecuador's oil. We need the oil from this Amazon area where these indigenous people live that I worked with as a Peace Corps volunteer. And we tell Ecuador, since you can't pay off your loans, what you need to do is turn over your Amazon to our oil companies. And that's what they're doing. And the indigenous people there, the ones I worked with now, have basically declared war. They said, we're not allowing these oil companies to come in. We're going to fight to the very last man if we have to. It's a terrible situation, and what it is all about is building empire. We've done this in every country around the world that has resources that we covet. Often this is oil in places like Indonesia, Nigeria, Ecuador, Venezuela, Colombia, so many different places, but sometimes it's other resources. For example, in Panama, it was the Panama Canal. And in this process, we've managed to create the largest empire in the history of the world, and we've done it largely without military might. It's been done primarily through economic hitmen like me. Now, when the economic hitmen fail, as we've done as we did in Panama with Omar Torrijos, and in Ecuador many years ago with Jaime Roldos when I was there, when we fail, the jackals are sent in. And these are CIA-sanctioned troublemakers. They will try to foment coups in a country. They'll try to overthrow the president. If they fail, if they're not able to do that, then they'll assassinate him. And Jaime Roldos of Panama, who was not overthrown, he was assassinated. And Omar Torrijos Jaime Roldos of Ecuador, Omar Torrijos of Panama, the same thing happened. We economic hitmen failed. The jackals went in and assassinated these presidents. It happened with Allende in Chile, Arbenz in Guatemala. It's part of what Vietnam was about. And when the jackals fail and the economic hitmen both fail, as in Iraq, the final step is for us to send in our young men and women to die and to kill. And that's what we're doing in Iraq today.
The final step is for us to send in our young men and women to die and to kill. And that's what we're doing in Iraq today.
But their Navy is gone, as I've said 1,000 times. Their Navy is gone. Their Air Force is gone. Everything's gone, and they're negotiating on fumes. But we'll see what happens. Maybe we have to go back and finish it. Maybe we don't. Right now, I mean, you can speak to Steve Witkoff and Jared. They're doing a good job. But right now, I think it looks like they want to just make a deal. They want to. They have. I don't think they have a choice. They're just going back to the internet because they're getting clobbered. Their economy is in free fall. They have 250% inflation. Their money has no value. Their whole economic system is broken down. They thought they were going to outweight me. You know, we'll outweight him. He's got the midterms. I don't care about the midterms. Look what happened last night. That was the prelude to the midterms. People understand it. They know that. Very simple. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. I'm doing that for the world. I'm not doing it just for us.
And on Iran, would you be comfortable with Russia or China taking their stockpile of highly enriched uranium, and have they offered to do that?
No, I wouldn't be comfortable.
You are a war criminal, and you will be tried. You should be disgusted with yourself. You have nothing to show for yourself but war and disgusting. You should be ashamed of yourself. How many American service members have to die for Israel? Pete Hegseth, you will be seen in history as a war criminal.
Donalds, not too many.
I don't know how it doesn't enrage every American in this fucking country to watch the President of the United States of America be woken up from the nap he was taking while everybody else was speaking at the Memorial Day ceremony at Arlington so that he can slur his way through a speech where he quips about the fact that there's not very many people named Donald buried at Arlington. He talks about what an epic success Operation Epic Fury has been. He shits his pants and then he sits back down. Say that I wish that there was one more person named Donald buried there, but even if he weren't a cowardly, draft-dodging shitbag who has repeatedly called the people who die on the surface of this country suckers and losers, he still wouldn't be worthy of shining the shoes of the brave souls that are buried there, much less resting alongside them, given that last week he talked about how he gets a kick out of it when people bring up the fact that there are 13 American service members who were killed in the war that he started to distract from the fact that he was best friends with a bunch of fucking pedophiles. Anybody who says that Donald Trump cares about the troops, he is so dumb they could fuck up a one-house paper route. And if you don't see an issue with the president making jokes and talking about how he gets a kick out of dead service members on the one day a year that we're all supposed to remember that they gave everything they had for us, get fucked!
And if you don't see an issue with the president making jokes and talk about how he gets a kick out of dead service members on the one day a year that we're all supposed to remember that they gave everything they had for us, get fucked!
Public transport, there are always these touch terminals where people either touch their phone or their wallet with a credit card inside. So this means that the infrastructure for making payments, also with an implant, are already there.
The question is, could this Black Mirror type of technology be implemented in other countries?
Han's ultimate vision is to take health microchips to developing countries where healthcare systems are less developed, so that people in remote areas with limited access to hospital facilities can just send their health information to doctors around the world to receive diagnosis. But until that technology is fully developed, would you be willing to get a microchip?
Jalal Mansour has known nothing but hard work since he came to Sweden from Iraq 32 years ago. His military service in the Iran-Iraq War and the First Gulf War was followed by a struggle to build his dry cleaning business in a strange land. It got stranger still when Sweden went almost entirely digital, with very few cash transactions. Mansour is now one of 130,000 Swedes to fall victim to online fraud, having his savings account emptied of $15,000.
When we had cash, it was simple. You go to the bank, you take it out. If you lose it, it's your responsibility. Now, these toy numbers on a screen can just disappear, and the bank doesn't know where they go. Why did we leave our land where there were no freedom or security and where people could deceive you? In Sweden, it's become the same thing now.
Swedes have been swindled out of $270 million in the past 5 years, often through the Swish payment and bank ID authentication apps. Cash cows for criminals in a country that's become world number one for digital payments. But hard currency is making a comeback. The war in Ukraine has led to soldiers patrolling Stockholm streets and banknotes going back into circulation. That's after a series of cyber attacks raised the threat of chaos if digital payments stop working. Swedish authorities have urged people to have enough physical cash for a week's supply of food, transport and medicine. But having money in your hand is one thing, having somewhere you can spend it is another. It's quite difficult to find shops in Sweden that want your business if you don't have a credit card or a payment app.
You don't take cash.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Major supermarkets are among those that still accept money, mainly from pensioners. Last month the government said it would draft laws to force grocery stores, petrol stations and pharmacies to take cash.
If payments are going to work in a crisis or a war, then they have to work in daily life. Cash is important, but other methods are too.
Go back to when you're a young man and you're being initially trained by Claudine. What was involved in that? How long did that take?
Claudine's training of me took a number of months. There was about 9 months between the time when Maine hired me and I went on my first assignment to Indonesia, and Claudine was training me during a great deal of that time, on and off. All of my training occurred in this very plush apartment, small apartment, but very plush on Beacon Street in Boston. Our headquarters, Maine's headquarters, was the Prudential Center in Boston, and this was very close to there. It was never done in our offices. It was very, very clandestine. I would spend tremendous amounts of time at Claudine's apartment, and she seduced me in every possible way. I was very seducible. She was gorgeous. She was intelligent. She was sensual. She was an amazing woman. And at the same time, she told me in no uncertain terms what was to be expected of me as an economic hitman, and told me that, and she called it a dirty business. And she said, we need to make sure that you're totally comfortable doing this and going off and doing this. If you're not comfortable doing it, then don't do it. Don't go to Indonesia. Don't take on this assignment, because once you're in for life. You can't turn back. So part of her training of me was to seduce me into it, but at the same time make absolutely certain that I was buying into it, that I was going to be a part of it.
And it's your belief that she had access to the information that the NSA had gotten out of you during the polygraph tests?
Correct. I have no doubt about that. She knew what my weaknesses were. She zeroed right in on them. I grew up the son of a prep school teacher in a private school in New Hampshire, and lived on the campus all my life. My dad didn't get paid much money at all. Everything was free. Our house was free. Our food was free. The lawns were mowed for us. The snow plowed. Everything was free. So we lived a pretty decent life, but I never had any cash. And I was surrounded all my life by boys who came from very, very wealthy families all over the world. And I heard their stories, and then I went to school with these boys, and they would go home on vacation to Venezuela, to Caracas, to Beirut, to London, to wherever they were from, and I would be stuck in this little campus all by myself in Tilton, New Hampshire, and very lonely, I'd basically been rejected by the town, and I'd rejected the town because there was animosity between the townies and the preppies, and I saw myself as a preppy. So some of it was self-imposed. But these guys would come back from their vacations with these amazing stories to tell, the debutante balls they'd been to, and the orgies, and my life was so boring, and I developed this complex that I really wanted to excel, and I wanted to live that kind of a life. Then I went to Middlebury College, and much of the same there, that there were a lot of wealthy people at Middlebury. So I had this desire, and I was extremely shy around women, incredibly shy around women, and pathetically shy around women. And I had this complex, and Claudine knew this. The NSA had identified this, and Claudine appealed to every side of it. She, it's just amazing. And then, as an economic hitman, I traveled always first class. I rode up in the bump of the 747s. I was always first class. Stayed in the best hotels wherever I went, sometimes the best suites in the best hotels. Ate at the best restaurants. Wined and dined around the world by people like the Shah of Iran and the presidents of various countries. I spent time with Robert McNamara, the president of the World Bank. It was quite a life. It was everything I'd ever dreamed about having, really. It was the realization of my fantasies.
So tell us about your first assignment in Indonesia.
Yes, I was sent to Indonesia as part of a team of 11 men who were there to design an electrical system for Java, the island of Java, which was the most heavily populated piece of real estate in the world at the time. Now, the reason we were going to Indonesia, this is in the early 70s, it was pretty obvious by then that Vietnam was going to fall. And the theory was the domino theory, that if Vietnam fell, then the rest of the Southeast Asian countries would fall too.
California lawmakers and the governor are now appealing to the White House to make a disaster declaration. Authorities say they are making progress tonight and may be able to avoid a catastrophic disaster. There is desperation to find a solution to this crisis. The tank is located in a densely populated area just miles away from two Disney theme parks, Angel Stadium and Knott's Berry Farm. At least 50,000 people in Orange County have been forced to evacuate their homes and seek residence in temporary shelters. And the mayor is warning residents not to ignore those evacuation orders, calling this a very dangerous situation. ABC's Jacqueline Lee leads us off from the command center.
Tonight, progress in the desperate efforts to prevent an environmental disaster in Orange County, California. Crews able to get close enough to that unstable 7,000-gallon tank full of hazardous liquid, finding a potential crack, offering a glimmer of hope. Why would this be a good thing?
So the thing about the crack is what we're looking for. It's going to relieve pressure. We want the pressure relieved out of that tank.
He goes on to explain there could still be an explosion, just not a catastrophic one. For days, officials have feared the tank would either explode into a fireball, igniting nearby tanks, or the methyl methacrylate, a highly volatile chemical inside, would leak out. Even short-term exposure could cause skin and eye irritation and breathing problems. More than 50,000 residents remain under evacuation orders. 2 residents filing a class action lawsuit yesterday against GKN Aerospace, the company in charge of the tanks. And tonight, the governor requesting President Trump issue an emergency declaration to support response operations. The EPA saying it has been monitoring air quality since Friday.
We've been involved in the modeling of different scenarios. We're being told that the tank will fail, but there are different scenarios as to what that means.
The evacuation area is a densely populated area and is not far from several major area attractions, including Disneyland, Knott's Berry Farm, and the Angels Stadium. The Angels going ahead with a game tonight against the Rangers. Officials insisting the areas outside of the evacuation zone are completely safe.
And we start with developing news out of Garden Grove. We've been following this all morning long. 40,000 people still under evacuation orders this morning, waiting to see if a dangerous chemical leak from a storage tank could explode. Rich Prickett is in Sky 5 over the scene this morning. Rich, what can you tell us?
Yeah, not knowing if or when evacuees will be allowed in is really the frustrating issue right now. But you can see firefighters doing everything they can to keep these tanks cooled. It's a very dynamic situation. You know, just when you think that the temperatures are getting closer to optimal, they start rising again. We just heard recently that the tanks possibly are rising 1 degree per hour. So really not the situation that they want. Right now, the only scenario that we have heard right now is that one of these tanks will possibly fail and spew out that toxic chemical or possibly explode. So unless they can devise another plan, it's really just a waiting game at this point. So you can see all the water that's being put out by that heavy stream, as well as the sprinkler systems to suppress and keep those tanks cool. I'll widen out here just for a moment here, just kind of give you the lay of the land. You can see the neighborhood that's just to the east, all under an evacuation order. We're not seeing much in the way of cars. Occasionally, we will see people drive through here. Kind of hard to tell exactly who might be going through this area, but you know, the evacuation orders are here for a reason, for your safety. So you certainly want to stay out of the area and abide those evacuation orders. We do see the Orange County Sheriff's Department as well as other authorities that are in the area patrolling. So you're certainly not supposed to be in this area. Now,
we have a statistic that we throw around in this country a lot, that 5% of the world's population, us, the American population, consumes 25% of the world's resources. Now that really bothers most of the rest of the world, that we're like this great octopus that reaches out with its tentacles and brings all the resources into us, and look at the lives we lead, while 3/4 of the world lives in destitution. Every day, 24,000 people die of starvation, and 30,000 children die of curable diseases every single day. And the people who live in the places where that's happening are angry, and they see us 5% of the world's population bringing in 25% of its resources, while so many of them live tragic, destitute, miserable, suffering lives, needlessly suffering. It doesn't have to happen. But an even more important statistic, I believe, is that of that 5% of the world's population, only less than 1% controls more of America's resources than the 90% at the bottom. So in fact, 25% of the world's resources are being funneled into this country essentially to serve 1% of 5% of the world's population. Terribly small. It's not even a pyramid. It's like a needle going up with a few very wealthy, very powerful people sitting on the top. It's created tremendous resentment around the world. It's what's created our insecurity. I would suggest that we will never be secure in this country, no matter how many guards we have at our airports, until we decide that we're going to be a lot more compassionate with the world. And what a great thing that is to do. That will bring us the security that we need, is when we start really opening ourselves up to the world and welcoming the world as brothers and sisters who we want to share the goodies with. And back in those days in Indonesia, these young Islamic people who I fell in love with and was working with saw all this. They anticipated it, and they warned me about it. And it was a very telling experience for me, very moving. And yet, I was seduced. Sex, money, and power was coming my way, man, and I was gonna take it, and I did, for too long.
So, what was your next assignment after that? What was the next big project you were saddled with, or country?
Yeah, after that, I kind of began spreading out and hiring other people to work with me. So I did a lot of work in the next few years in Panama, and I also went back to Indonesia to do the same sort of thing we'd done in Java up on the island of Sulawesi, and Colombia and Iran. So for 3 or 4 years, my time was very much split between those countries, and I would take other journeys into Egypt and Guatemala and many other places, and I began hiring. I mean, I became very popular within Charles T. Main because I was going along with the system, and the World Bank was loving what I was doing, and I just kept expanding my department. I became a partner. I was making a lot of money, and for the company as well as for myself. So it involved quite a few countries. But, you know, the ones that had the greatest impression on me after Indonesia were Panama and Iran, and then Saudi Arabia.
The technology has already received special recognition from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, with human trials expected to begin soon. Neuralink has also made progress in treating paralysis with over 20 patients already implanted with the brain chip under an ongoing study. These patients have been able to control computers and digital devices using only their thoughts. In some early cases, users have even played video games, browsed the internet, and posted online, showing real-world use of the technology. Despite earlier safety concerns that delayed trials, the company has moved ahead after addressing regulatory issues.
Hi, my name is Bob. In view of its potential to be possibly the biggest game changer ever, do you have any plans to enter the field of artificial intelligence? And in general, what are your thoughts on it? Do you think it's even close to being ready for prime time?
I think we should be very careful about artificial intelligence. If I were to guess at what our biggest existential threat is, it's probably that. So we need to be very careful with artificial intelligence. I'm increasingly inclined to think that there should be some regulatory oversight maybe at the national and international level, just to make sure that we don't do something very foolish. I mean, with artificial intelligence, we are summoning the demon.
With artificial intelligence, we are summoning the demon.
You know all those stories where there's the guy with the pentagram and the holy water, and he's like, yeah, he's sure he can control the demon. Doesn't work out.
I take it there will be no HAL 9000 going up to Mars.
HAL 9000 would be easy. It's way more complex than, I mean, it would put HAL 9000 to shame, yeah.
Do you want to destroy humans? Please say no.
Okay, I will destroy humans.
No, I take it back.
Do you worry at all that you are now an opponent of Donald Trump and Elon Musk, two of the most powerful men on planet Earth, that you could be targeted by them in other ways, not just lawsuits?
I am being targeted currently. I mean, we have people, investigators. There was an Escalade outside of our house yesterday. There's people physically confronting the people in our lives. However, I'm not sure if you're aware, but the mortality rate is 100% for humans. And so I want my children to know that they should never trade being materially comfortable for doing what's right. And doing the right thing and doing what's good takes sacrifice. And for many, many years of my life, I chose material comfort over doing the right thing. And it's not something that I'm interested in anymore.
That if the bride of Christ in America, if she does not wake up, if she does not pray, if she does not repent, if she does not stand on business, we will be held captive in our own country by a radical ideology. We will fall very quickly and our children will suffer. This is me warning America